football and our 17 football programs will all look to accomplish greatness. With 33 days until week 0, we know the focus will be on what's ahead for this year. ACC football has the toughest non-conference schedule in the country. 27 games against Power 4 opponents, including Notre Dame. 9 non-conference games against teams ranked in the final 2023 AP Top 25 poll. 10 non-conference games against teams in the ESPN's 2024 Way Too Early Top 25. All of these are the most of any conference. We have elite coaching leadership. 6 ACC head coaches named to the 2024 Dodd Trophy preseason watch list. No conference has more. 2 of the 3 active coaches in the country to win a national title reside here in the ACC, Mac Brown and Dabo Swinney. And the combination of our proven veteran coaches combined with our dynamic young coaches is incredibly powerful. The ACC is the conference of quarterbacks. 13 enter the season with over 20 career touchdown passes and 3,500 career passing yards. 8 quarterbacks are projected to start week 1 in the 2024 NFL season, 25% of NFL teams. And since 2018, at least 1 quarterback has been drafted in the first round in 5 different drafts, the only conference that can state that claim. ACC football has the nation's top returning passer and receiver in yards per game from last year in Cam Ward of Miami and Colin Lacey of Louisville, plus the second returning rusher in Omarion Hampton from North Carolina. Additionally, when you look at the final CFP Top 25 rankings over the last 4 years, there are only 7 programs that have been in each, with Clemson and NC State representing the ACC. No conference has more than 2 teams that can state that claim. The combination of our preeminent players and elite leadership only furthers expectations on what's ahead for our individual teams and conference. There's not a more exciting collection of teams in the country than in the ACC. On the football innovation front, the ACC remains committed to embracing the use of technology to elevate performance of our student athletes, teams, officials, and more. Between our state-of-the-art ACC Game Day Operations Center and working with Apple to bring iPad technology to the sidelines and our coaches' booths, we are proud of our unparalleled prioritization of technology and the positive impact it will have for our league. Finally, the season kicks off in week 0. SMU will open against Nevada, while Florida State and Georgia Tech will meet in the Aer Lingus Classic in Dublin. Immediately following our ACC Network 5th anniversary celebration in Bristol, I'll head to Ireland and anticipate there'll be many of our partners on that flight, as ESPN's College Game Day will broadcast live before the ACC's first league game of the year, marking the first time the premier pregame show will travel outside of the United States. Upon returning from Ireland, we will immediately jump into week 1, which features all 17 teams competing. 15 non-conference games will be played Thursday, Friday, and Saturday before leading into our annual Labor Day Monday night game. The ACC regular season undoubtedly will be one of fierce competition as teams contend for the opportunity to play in the annual ACC football championship game right here in Charlotte. As announced last week, the game will again be televised on prime time on ABC before our teams head to the college football playoff and represent the ACC in our strong lineup of bowls as part of bowl season. Make no mistake, I am extremely confident and enthusiastic about ACC football. I'm hopeful I was able to address what I knew would be some of your questions. I'm happy to take any of those questions from the floor, so I'll turn it back over to Amy.
All right, we'll move into the Q&A portion of today's forum. We do have multiple mic holders. Let us get you those mic holders. Make sure we see you. I'll get to as many questions as we can. And before you ask your question, give us your name and affiliation if at all possible. So again, we'll take questions. We'll start down here on the front, on the left.
Andrea Adelson, ESPN.com. Jim, you just talked about how the lawsuits are damaging and disruptive to the ACC. I'm just wondering how this doesn't continue to become a distraction as we try and turn the focus to football.
Good to see you, Andrea. We've had 6 months of disruption, and I think we've handled it incredibly well. And so I think it's important for me to lead our group in particular, not only our staff, but more importantly our schools, to compartmentalize the legal piece of what's happening and not let it distract us or take us away from what we're all trying to do, and that's provide great experiences for our student athletes, teams, coaches, put the focus back on the fields and the areas of competition. But I will tell you, there isn't a day that doesn't go by that I don't spend some time on the legal cases. I don't think that that's going to change. We're really fortunate to have hired Pearl Hauk, our first internal GC, and have great legal teams in a myriad of places. So we have proven that you have to move forward even with these types of distractions and really important issues that are part of your daily lives.
Take our next question right up here in the front.
Hey, Jim. Luke DeCock from the News and Observer. You've spoken in the past about your concerns about college athletics becoming a gated community or a series of gated communities. The House settlement, as proposed, a lot of the money in that settlement is going to go to Power 5 athletes. A lot of the money is coming from the NCAA at large, including schools that don't even play football. Do you have concerns about how that would exacerbate the divides in college athletics, and do you think the settlement is equitable?
Good to see you, Luke. And I think another really good question. Here's what I would say. I'll take the second part first. It is, to me, equitable relative to who's paying for that, et cetera. We've all been part of this association. This idea that it's football only and it should be driven by the football coaches, I do not agree with that. And I think the board of directors emphasized that. They would not have signed off on that if they felt differently. So there's shared pain on this. The NCAA, I give our new president, Charlie Baker, a lot of credit. He's trying to take the most of it on. As it relates to the first part of the question, I talked about that a couple years ago, and I don't think everybody liked what I had to say in that particular forum. It's okay, but that has been kind of our history of being under the tent kind of together, but you're seeing some clear separation. And I think there'll be choices to be made, and that's what we're working through right now with this proposed settlement. Is there's so many steps that affect the long-term future, but you don't know what the future is going to be until you start to get into it. So, for example, we're talking about roster sizes, and that's been well communicated out there. I'm not going to talk anything about that, but that's one element of it. But the distribution of dollars will be different for the first time in a real meaningful way for our student athletes. So I'm excited for our student athletes. As I said before, I have, in my own family and for Laura and I, we know what having student athletes in your house looks like. So I'm really happy for them. This is a good thing for student athletes. There's going to be added significant pressure for each of our schools, not only in the ACC, but around the country, to continue to try to provide broad-based programming, Title IX, all the things that we believe in. So it will be a challenge, but I'm excited about it. I really am. The final thing I'll say to wrap up, Luke, is this is what I would call a reset. And I said this from the very beginning. I said this, several months ago when it looked like we had some kind of agreement. This is a reset in college sports. It doesn't mean that college sports still can't be great and still is interesting and all the rest of it, but it's a reset in the structure of it. And I look forward to being a part of those discussions and helping lead us as we move forward.
We're going to go over here.
Jim, David Teal with the Richmond Times-Dispatch. You mentioned the ACC's exploration of revenues and the $600 million in new incremental revenue from expansion. Have you and/or the board and ADs discussed private capital, private equity, naming rights? And if so, what have those discussions been like?
Appreciate it, David. Good to see you. I'm not going to go into internal conversations that we've had with the board, but I wouldn't be doing my job if we aren't exploring every area that's available. So I know that it gets out there, and sometimes folks want it to get out there, et cetera. We've done a really nice job of kind of keeping things together in a private way, but I would just say we are, and we have continued to look at all options as it relates to revenue. And I'm proud of two things in particular that I mentioned in my notes about revenue generation. Revenue just isn't there. You just can't just kind of will it. But what we did with expansion, with 3 new schools, I think really will help our conference. And then what we're doing with success initiatives, and this was before the litigation even began. That was something that we wanted to do. I felt like we needed to do. The board was terrific. It didn't have unanimity at first, but as we walk through it, it will reward those teams that have the most success. And there's not it's not an absolute correlation, but those that invest more have a higher chance to have success. We all know that. Doesn't guarantee it. And so that will be good. That will be a nice incentive and a realization of success when we distribute for the first time of any conference, at least in the Power Four, in a disproportionate way.
Take our next question from over here on our far left.
Hey, Jim, David Hale with ESPN. I would say that your comments to start were probably a little more forceful and emotional sounding than we've heard you largely talk about some of these issues with the lawsuits. I'm curious if you think this is something that you need to change the narrative a little bit or the talking points a little bit, and if so, what is it that gives you so much optimism about the future of the league with or without Florida State and Clemson?
Forceful moments deserve forceful support and leadership, and I don't know that I've changed at all other than I stand by everything I've said from the first interview I did around the Orange Bowl on ACCN to today. This is a really important time for the conference, and either you believe in what's been signed or you don't. And so we are going to do everything we can to protect and to fight the league because I see a group of student athletes there. We now have 12,000, I think, 200 student athletes. And this has been a league that started way before me, 71 years ago, and will be a league that'll be around a long time after I depart. This league deserves us to take this really serious issue and to handle it appropriately. What gives me, promise and conviction of it? Because I understand, I think these schools, I understand where we're going. We've made some really good adjustments. And this conference is bigger than any one school or schools.
Take our next question from right over here, right side, second row.
Royal Howell, the Juice Network. Commissioner, you spoke on students and not employees and fairness and clarity. There's been a lot of coaches around the country, not just the ACC that's mentioned, they're concerned about NIL and the revenue gap. And you've had coaches go on record stating that how can they compete with other teams when it comes to NIL if they don't have the necessary funds to match an Alabama or a Clemson or a Notre Dame? How can those teams in the middle of the pack compete when it comes to NIL if they don't have the necessary funds to do so?
A couple things. One is this. I want to just talk about student versus employee, and a couple reasons why I don't believe that's necessary. I'm against it. Taxation. I don't think parents and families want to be taxed on scholarship, room and board, book, tuition, travel, equipment, health, medical, all of those benefits, right? Termination. You're an employee, there's something called termination of employment. I don't think student athletes should have to face that, right? We have nearly 25,000 international students that are on visas. There's a direct conflict as it relates to them working in the United States and being declared employees. So there's a lot of reasons why, but ultimately, we want to continue to provide student athletes with benefits. and you see the evolution, the Alston Awards, cost of attendance, name, image, and likeness, now the House settlement case. It's really a good time to be a student athlete from benefit standpoint. I think there's a lot of pressures. We won't get into that right now, but I think they have a lot of burden, a lot of pressures, a lot of expectations. Social media is really difficult, but that's the employment piece of it. The other part of your question as it relates to how do you close the gap, how do you be competitive? The ACC's never been a league that's led in revenue generation and distribution. We just haven't. But we've had an incredible span of success. This will be about creativity and innovation for our schools and for our league. And I tried to go over some of the things we're trying to help the league with and our member schools. And I know that we'll be able to do it. I think the good thing about this is these will be local decisions. These will be decisions made by our 18 schools about how much they want to participate in that 22% of what will be, we think, the House settlement. That's a good place for us to be. But the more money we can generate, obviously the more money that goes back to the schools. It's not the ACC's dollars, it's really the schools' dollars. So I'm confident in our schools. I'm confident in our direction and plans about creativity and innovation, helping us some close that gap.
I'm going to come over here to our far right on the aisle.
Hey, Commissioner. Can you hear me? Commissioner Eric Spanberg with the Charlotte Business Journal. You mentioned that you've now been here a year. I have a multi-part question. I'm curious if the size and scope of your staff has changed much in that year. Secondly, one of the reasons you came here was to expand your corporate base. Is that working? And then lastly, with the approved renovations of Spectrum Center and Bank of America Stadium, how does that impact your revenue and presentation of championship events?
Good to see you, Eric. I'll take it one at a time. Had to take some notes because it was getting lengthy there. Staff's about the same. We're under 50 full-time, staff members. I said it before, they're exceptional. It's like your world. I mean, the time that each of you have to put in to do your job, it's insatiable. If you can give it 12 hours today, it's 12 hours. If you give it 14 hours, it'll take 14. If you can only give it 8, that's what the staff is. So it's less than 50, trying to provide the greatest experience we can for now 12,200 student athletes. I think the world of them. I wouldn't want another team, a better group of individuals. So that's the group. Second piece, corporate sponsorships never been better. I think this last year we did more than my first 2.5 years, almost 3 years, just locally here. The presence has been great. The media piece of it's been great. The international airport, maybe connection to your first part, Eric. The recruitment and retention of talent has been really eye-opening about people wanting to kind of move to Charlotte, et cetera. I will say this, though. I loved our time in Greensboro, and I will always cherish that time. And I really enjoyed my 2.5 years there. That is a great community, and I think everybody knows how difficult that was for the ACC to move to Charlotte. Spectrum Center, I'm very excited about the renovations. Have had a chance to meet with the new owners at a game during the year, a Hornets game. I think that can be really good for us. Obviously, we're going to have the men's basketball tournament there this year. It's the first time, Eric, I think, since 2019. We have, someone told me the most recent figure is I think we have about 105,000 living alums in the Charlotte area. And I'm excited about just putting that tournament that has such great history in this great state in Charlotte and being able to walk, right, as maybe some of you are experiencing these during our kickoff this week, where you can get to a hotel and not need anything. You can walk to a restaurant, you can walk over the Spectrum Center, you can go to some museums and the rest of it. So I'm excited about that, and we'll continue to look ways to use the Spectrum Center. We'll be there with women's basketball shortly after, which I'm, again, really excited about that. And having football here, having baseball here, we're playing lacrosse here. It's really a nice focal point as we not only have our championships in the Charlotte area, but we'll distribute them around and we want to continue to get into different markets and all of that, but this is a good place for the ACC to call home.
We're going to go right here again on this edge.
Hey, Jim. Mike Barber from the Richmond Times-Dispatch. David asked you about alternate, ways to generate money. I'm curious specifically with private equity, what concerns would you have with schools pursuing an investment on that front?
Nothing's for free. That's probably the most important piece of this thing. And yes, influx of cash allow you to do some things. But do schools want to do that individually? Do they want to do that collectively? Do they not want to do it at all? Again, I think it's just the times that we're in that you're looking at lots of different options and trying to make sure that you're vetting them at the right level to make really good, educated decisions.
We're going to slide over here to our left.
Will Vandervoort with the Clemson Insider. Commissioner, just wanted to ask, you had some strong words for Clemson and Florida State today. Right here.
Yeah.
You had some strong words. Just curious to what your working relationship is with them right now, and has that been a distraction at all in your business activities with those two universities?
I think very highly of Rick McCullough. I think very highly of Jim Clemens. I'd say we're friends. I think very highly of Michael Alford. I think very highly of Graham Neff. It hasn't changed my working relationship with them at all, because of how I've tried to address it and how I've asked the staff to address it. And that is the legal piece will be the legal piece. And we'll do what we have to do just like they're going to do what they have to do. But the moment that first lawsuit happened in December, I grabbed the staff and I told them that we are not going to treat any school any differently, because student athletes have nothing to do with this, coaches have nothing to do with this, a lot of administrators don't. That is just a separate piece. We owe these young men and women at those two schools the very best experience possible. So this thing doesn't have to be evil. This thing doesn't have to be about hatred and all the other things that I think we all see kind of just free-flowing in our societies. It's important, and we've taken our stance, and we'll stay on that stance, but we'll do it in a very respectful way.
Come over here next.
Jim, Josh Graham, WSJS. I'm on your right. You said earlier that the 12-team college football playoff format is good for the ACC. Do you feel the same about a 14-team playoff and perhaps uneven AQs?
It's good to see you, Josh. I would just want to say this. Josh is a really big Baltimore Orioles fan, and he was like crushing me with a text about he was going to see the Chicago Cubs play at Camden Yards in Baltimore. Cubs aren't having a great season. The Orioles are certainly having a great season. And then I haven't heard from him till this morning. I thought he was in the witness protection program. Not that everyone would know, but the Cubs went to Baltimore and swept all 3 games. It wasn't even close. So good to see you. Do I need to answer that question? All right. Listen, there's a lot of things that have been talked about and will be talked about the CFP. And I used the word hammered. We hammered it out in my opening remarks, and that's what occurred. But at the end of the day, it's a good thing for college football. It's a good thing for those that play college football at the FBS level, and we're at a 12-team event. I think it's been intentional that we haven't looked beyond these next 2 years until we have a chance to see how the 12-team format plays itself out. I think it's really good as it relates to just more opportunities for student athletes to play. My biggest issues were protection of the ACC and conference champions and the health and safety and welfare of student athletes, that this ends up being a long season. So we'll address whether we stay at 12 or go beyond. So it's really speculation right now because honestly, since we have met and declared that it was a 12-team playoff, we've had no discussions about what a potential new format would look like.
I'm going to come right down here in the very front on the right.
Hey, Jim, David Glenn with the North Carolina Sports Network. Coach K recently told me that when it comes to realignment, he sees one of the biggest factors is, quote, Fox being at war with ESPN. And you just described ESPN and your relationship with them as having never been stronger. It would seem it would help the ACC if somebody at ESPN would come out and say, this is our partner through 2036 as that original contract was written, rather than discussions about a February deadline and opt-out option. What can you tell us about how ESPN is advocating for you, given your description that the relationship has never been better?
Good to see you, David. Where did you see Coach K?
He was on my show.
Okay, all right. We both went to the same high school, different generations though, okay? Different generations. We have a great relationship. I'm not just saying that. We have a great relationship with ESPN and the ACC network and all the rest of that. And we've had significant positive discussions and progress on one component of the contract. Our partnership with ESPN is not going away. It's not going away. And we have talked to them about additional resources and how do we monetize it. We're 50-50 partners on that. And so they're as motivated as we are to generate more revenue for the overall television deal. So I'm very optimistic about where we're going with them. They understand the importance, and I'll just leave it at that.
Go back here, again on our right, third row.
Billy Unbody with On3. With the time zones now spanning coast to coast, what are the challenges of scheduling, particularly in a multitude of sports where travel is going out to Cal and Stanford, and how have ESPN been helping and trying to create the best game slots too for programs and viewership?
Yeah. So being in multiple time zones really good from a programming standpoint, and we're excited about what that looks like. So we've had conversations with them, and our internal people have done a really good job with some of the folks up in Bristol. I think one of the components we have to continue to look at is what's it doing from a student-athlete standpoint. And honestly, we spent a lot of time on that. We really did. And it's unfortunate because when you go through expansion, you're not able to engage with necessarily student-athletes because it's at such a high level, it's at the board level, and so you can't get all kinds of opinions about it, right, and all the rest of it. But we were very clear with the 3 new schools about what would be the reaction, what would be the feeling, because they're going to be coming to the East Coast more often than our student-athletes are going to have to go to the West Coast. And they were obviously very enthusiastic about it, et cetera. So depending on what sport it is, it'll vary about the number of trips going east to west or west to east. But it's almost unlimited when you think about not only do you have a great partner in ESPN, but you have your own network, again, one of only 3, where you can do it for a variety of sports, different time zones, kickoff or first pitch or the start of a soccer match, whatever sport that you want to use as an example. I don't know that we have it all figured out, only that you're going to see us from 12 in the morning for football, since we're here at football kickoff, 12 noon, all the way up to that late game on Saturday night. But having some parameters about when you travel in one direction or another, not maybe having another trip out there, for another year for the current teams, and then maybe having that off week come after that. And both ways, sometimes when it's Cal, Stanford, or SMU coming towards the east. So again, feel good about where that's at, and I feel like we can really, really have some great platforms on ACC Network, on ESPN, ABC, et cetera.
Take our last question from right here, second row on the right.
Hi, Commissioner. Brian Murphy with WRAL. Two quick ones. Last year at this time, you mentioned the exposure that the league was getting with all those primetime Saturday games, a lot of noon kickoffs. Obviously, the SEC has taken a lot of those kickoff times. Have you talked to ESPN about making sure that the ACC is not that those Saturdays aren't just SEC triple header after SEC triple header? And you also mentioned roster size. I wonder when there are decisions made on that, will the entire ACC have to adopt those roster sizes, adopt those scholarships, or will you allow that decision to be made on a campus-by-campus basis?
Good to see you, Brian. Let me go in the kind of the reverse order. Roster sizes, what I'll say is we've had too many, not too many, we've had an awful lot of conversations with our schools, with our ADs, SWAs, coaches, and the rest of it. I think one of the things, if the settlement goes through, is this is not a reduction of scholarship opportunities. This is scholarships in addition to what we're currently giving. So this is going to be good for our sports as it relates to equivalency sports, that right now baseball is at 11.9. You can't have a baseball team with 11.9, so it'll go up exponentially. So I feel like we're in a good place there. I can't really say much more. We've met as commissioners probably once a week for the last 6 weeks on it, but getting information so that collectively we can get to a number that feels right. But it's a little bit like the teeter-totter principle is if you push on one sport, maybe on the male side, it drops the women on the other. And so you're trying to make sure, again, there's equity, Title IX is met, and some of those kinds of things. So it's pretty complex, but feel really good about the progress we're made. Your first part of the question, we have talked about times, situating the ACC in really good spots, both on ABC and the ESPN channels, as well as our own network. I feel good about it as we look into the season. I feel good about what I've seen in the month of September about where we're going to be. But they understand. They understand fully. And I also know our teams are going to play well. And when you play well, you get rewarded.
All right, thank you very much. That concludes today's Commissioners Forum. We're going to need to flip this room. Commissioner, thank you for your time. And we'll be back here with our first team at 2:15. Again, as